What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another video. And we are continuing our series here, our Hardcore Druid Companion Build series in Diablo 4. Now, I just wanted to take a second to tell you guys thanks for all my returning viewers and everybody who tuned into the last video. I did want to say I adjusted some audio things, so hopefully these videos start to sound a little better. But let's just go ahead and get right into the build here. As you can see, we are in Dulra, I believe is how you say it, and we are just completing up this area so we can work on those quests to unlock our boons. And we get a little point here, and we're just kind of finishing up some passives. Most of the passives are the same from the last video, and we will be doing a kind of overview of our skill choices in the next video before our first capstone dungeon. So as you can see here, we are just unlocking all of our different boons. And I do want to take a second just to kind of go over the boons and why I chose them. So first off, let's start with the deer. Now, I do end up specializing in the deer so I can pick up 2 boons from there. And that's because for my build, I'm looking to just increase my overall crowd control duration reduction, as has been the kind of theme of these past few videos. And so I end up picking up wariness for that 10% reduction from 10% damage reduction from elites, and then I pick up advantageous beast to give us that 15% crowd control duration reduction. So 15% is pretty significant there, and I think it's an overlooked passive, especially considering that most of the time people die in hardcore if it's not from a disconnect. It's usually due to crowd control effects. So it's a pretty much a must choose here in my build. And then I move on down to the eagle. So funny thing about the eagle here, the aspect of the eagle actually looks like a crow. I'm not sure if whoever designed that has ever seen an eagle before, but I did think it was pretty funny when I first saw it. But let's go ahead and talk about the eagle. So eagle has several pretty nice passives in it. It has Scythe Talons, which gives you increased critical hit chance by 5%. You have Iron Feather for a recently buffed 14% max life. Then you have attack speed from swooping attacks. That's a nice 10% buff. And then Avian Wrath. And that's a 30% critical strike damage increase, which I think has been made a little bit better since the reduction in critical hit damage from your gear affixes. But I ended up choosing the swooping attacks passive, and that's just because I really enjoy that faster attack speed. It plays so well into the game throughout all your different builds for Druid. So it's the one I like to choose, and obviously you could choose between, I personally think, crit chance or critical strike damage, but I just really enjoy that 10% attack speed. And then moving down to the wolf. Now the wolf is a little bit harder here for me to choose. I know the most go-to one would be pack leader, as pack leader gives you that 20% chance to reset your skill cooldowns for your companion skills off of critical strikes, and that's usually pretty easy to reset. You can get them up almost 100% of the time. But I just wanted to try out Energize. So Energize is dealing damage, has up to a 15% chance to restore 10 spirit. And I thought, let me go ahead and see what it can do for my overall spirit generation to see if I can build up my sustainable damage. And honestly, guys, I wasn't too pleased with it. Again, another one of these passives that's on a conditional, and the conditional is just too excessively low. I mean, a 15% chance to restore 10 spirit is pretty lousy. So I did play around with it a little bit here as I started level 248, but I probably will end up switching out of it, and I'll probably go into pack leader or bolster. Now, I know bolster isn't one that's used very often, but due to the fact that I don't use Earthen Bulwark, and I don't use the passive that gives me more fortification, I thought maybe 15% of your max life when you use a defensive skill. So I end up, as you can see, I end up swapping over to Cyclone, and I feel like maybe that might be a good benefit to using Cyclone here. So Cyclone I ended up picking up because I wanted that little bit of extra tankiness, and I wanted to make my companions a little tankier in a meaningful way. And I feel like Cyclone does that, especially when you use the affix that gives Cyclone physical damage reduction. And so I feel like it's a fairly long cooldown for its active skill. I feel like that needs to probably move down a little bit, probably along the 10 seconds or less line, because all it really does is provide you with a knockback. And but overall, I thought it was a pretty decent skill to kind of move away from Bulwark. I feel like it was the go-to one. So I might pick up Fortify, Bolster from the Boon Tree. And then there is also Calamity in the Wolf boon tree, and that basically it just extends the duration of your ultimate skill. And it's a pretty amazing boon there. I mean, it gives a 25% increase to the duration, but we're not using any ultimates, so it's not one that we're going to be picking up. And as you can see, I just end up choosing that last passive in Cyclone that gives us a little bit more damage reduction every so often. And then for the last boon section, the snake or boon tree, whatever you want to call it, the snake. Now the snake has some, hit or miss passives here. So let's talk about the first one, Obsidian Slam. Every 20th kill, you cause your next earth skill to overpower. I mean, do we really even have to talk about how terrible that sounds? Every 20th kill, it's pretty awful. Terrible conditional. Needs to be changed. And then Overload. So Overload is the one I end up going with. And again, another conditional here, and it's just kind of, there's just so many for this build, and something I hope they change in the future. But dealing lightning damage has up to a 40% chance to cause the target to emit a static discharge, dealing 20% lightning damage to the surrounding enemies. So again, not that I think that it's bad to have these kind of conditionals for different passives and stuff, but I just don't feel like the damage they output warrants these things to be a part of the passive. I mean, it would be different if we're talking about a huge spike in damage, but we're not really. It's not really that big of a deal. I think it adds some meaningful damage, but nothing that would warrant there to be another kind of conditional gatekeeping a passive to be activated. And then Calm Before the Storm is the last one, and that's nature magic skills have up to a 10. Well, that's the next to last. Sorry, let me go back. So then we have Masochistic. So Masochistic was actually a really good passive that they did nerf again, putting it back on a conditional, but not too bad of a conditional. So we have critical strikes with shape-shifting skills have up to a 75% chance to heal you for 3% max life. Now, I personally would have preferred them to just reduce the overall heal to maybe like 1.5% or 2% instead of making this a 75% chance to heal. But overall, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I still think that's a great boon to have if you're running any kind of shape-shifting build, especially one that kind of needs that extra HP regeneration. And then for the last one, Calm Before the Storm. So nature magic skills have up to 10% chance to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate skill by 2 seconds. Now, I think that 10% chance isn't really high enough. Now, I don't think it should be significantly high. It should probably move up to like 15 or 20%. But overall, it sounds pretty good. But in practice, I haven't really noticed a significant difference in terms of the cooldown of ultimate skills. So maybe they can kind of change up that a little bit. Obviously, you don't want to make it too high of a chance to proc, because then you're just going to have infinite ultimates. And as fun as that sounds, it's quite game-breaking in terms of what certain builds can do that are already pretty overpowered to begin with. So that pretty much covers my boons. So just to go back over it, we end up picking up Weariness and Advantageous Beast from the Deer Tree. Then we end up picking up Swooping Attacks from the Eagle Tree. Then we end up picking up Energize, but we'll probably swap into Bolster for the Wolf Tree. And then we end up picking up Overload in the Snake Tree. So those are my boons for this build. And as you can see, like I said, we swapped over to Cyclone for our defensive skill, just to give us that extra, kind of knockback occasionally, as well as give our wolves some meaningful damage reduction overall. And then I did want to talk about the different gear that I'm looking for. So gear wise, I'm kind of, just kind of selecting the pieces that are of higher gear power, mostly through these early levels before we get to tier 3, because tier 3 is really where I start to kind of really start to be picky with my gear pieces, because that's going to be the tier that we eventually move into the end game, and you kind of want to have a decent build going into tier 4, because there is quite a large gap of difficulty between tier 3 and tier 4, as opposed to tier 2 and tier 3. So the things that I'm kind of looking for here in tier 2 are just overall for my, attack affixes. I'm looking for, lucky hit chance, some critical strike chance, as those are very important aspects of our build. And then obviously, sorry guys, I'm a little sick here. And then obviously some attack speed and basic skill attack speed. And then defensive wise, we're really just kind of relying on our aspects more than anything, and just kind of grabbing those next powerful pieces to increase our armor in a meaningful way. But any damage reduction is really useful, preferably ones that don't rely on enemies being a certain distance from you. So I do prefer to stick to like damage reduction while fortified, or damage reduction, from poisoned enemies as we use Poison Creeper, things like that, or just flat damage reduction. Even though those values are typically pretty low, I still don't mind them. And obviously percent plus armor is nice, even though, like I said, it did receive a sizable reduction in its overall values it can have on your gear pieces. Now, something to talk about there, and not specifically for this build, but for people who are running werewolf builds, at the armor plus percent is actually still pretty nice for werewolf builds. So if you're not running that as a new player, just honestly, get those affixes on your gear, because I believe you can get it on boots and you can get it on your amulet. So it's still relatively high, the amount of armor you can get while in werewolf form. And it's pretty easy to sustain werewolf form for the duration of your playthrough once you get into specific builds. And then I do want to touch base on what I'm going to be doing in the next video. The next video will pretty much be kind of overview of all my skills, and then our capstone dungeon, our very first capstone dungeon, and moving into tier 3. And then I will probably be restructuring these videos to make them more about, maybe specific Paragon boards, but overall just gameplay, and going over different affixes and gear pieces that I obtained throughout my time in tier 3, moving into tier 4. I probably won't, give a, complete breakdown of each and every Paragon level, as I don't think that would be very useful. But overall, I think the build's working really well. I feel like I'm doing pretty substantial damage. I don't think I'll have an issue in the capstone dungeon. I think it will pretty much be a breeze. I will be tackling it at level 48, as I do not want to have my Paragon points. I feel like that'd be a bit unfair. But yeah, that's it for the video, guys. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Thanks for watching again, and like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and peace out, guys. See you in the next one.